Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Community Relations Group Conversation for Thursday, March 12th, 2020. We have one question in the agenda, and the link is there as well. So please take a look at the slides. I have the first question, so I'll go ahead and kick it off. John, on slide 14, you mentioned that some of our in-person meetups have dropped off due to the coronavirus. And you also mentioned that you're undertaking some efforts to try to move these meetups to a virtual setting. I wonder if you've had any traction yet from or interest from the community in terms of meeting up virtually. And then also, secondly, have you seen any thought leadership out there on moving, migrating in-person meetups to virtual? And do you think there's any room for that kind of thought leadership out there, similar to what the remote team has been successful with?
Yep, thanks for the question. So we have seen a few meetup organizers express interest in planning virtual meetups. I think the plan that we're going to move forward with is for GitLab or kind of the evangelist program me to plan some kind of pilot event to see how that works in practice, and then use that event as a way for us to kind of develop a set of best practices that we can then distribute to some meetup organizers. So we have some groups in Latin America and groups in Europe that have expressed interest in hosting virtual meetups, and I expect that demand and interest will continue to grow as the pandemic spreads to more places. So we're working on kind of creating that set of best practices that you kind of alluded to, but we're going to do that based on our own experiences. And right now we don't have enough, I think, experience to draw from to kind of take that thought leadership role. But I'm hoping that in the next few weeks, as we get some practice under our belts, that we'll be able to kind of document and share what we think those best practices are. I'll add links to kind of some comments and issues that document our plans in a little bit more detail. But we've evaluated a few platforms that kind of mirror more of the in real life meetup experience. And so at GitLab we do lots of webinars, which are great ways for us to kind of deliver content to our community. But I think with the virtual meetups, we're trying to create virtual events that will offer some of the value add that meetups provide, which is one, connecting with folks locally. And so I think creating a process where local meetup organizers can plan events for their communities will be great, because for Latin American folks, they might have a language that they speak, and in Europe there might be different languages. So having localized opportunities for people to connect, I think, is still important. And then there's value in kind of one-to-one or small group conversations that happen at meetups that we'll also try and replicate. And so we've evaluated a few platforms for that. I think we should have a decision on that in the next day or two. We're just looking at pricing and things, but it's possible we'll just use Zoom and breakout groups, kind of similar to how we were doing with the company call before we kind of revamped the company call. As a first iteration, with potentially evaluating or using one of these other platforms as time goes on, and we see how valuable the Zoom conversations are versus some of the one-to-one features and other things that they hop in or run the world or some other platforms offer. So doing a lot of homework on it right now. Intend to roll out a plan to our meetup organizers definitely by the end of the month, hopefully sooner. Yeah, and then at that time, we'll probably do some blogging and things about that.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I think we're all excited to see how it goes, and wish you the best of luck in that.
Thanks.
Okay, looks like we have another question from John Mason. Are you here? Would you like to verbalize your question?
Sure. I was just curious as to what kind of materials we were providing as part of the education program to market it. Are there instructional materials that are also part of that program, or is it just licensing at this point?
Thanks for the question, John. I will go ahead and take that one since I'm the education program manager. That is definitely on our roadmap, and we would absolutely love to be able to provide those kind of resources. It's one of our goals in our handbook, and we definitely want to provide those via GitLab itself in terms of a repo to host that kind of material and allow our participants to contribute directly to that repository. We are just not quite there yet. I started in November and been cleaning up some business processes and getting us ready to scale, but I think that'll definitely be an OKR for next quarter.
Thanks.
Yep. Sid, looks like you're next. Would you like to verbalize your question?
Yeah, thanks for that. So it says in the presentation, our responsiveness is a differentiator. People really like that GitLab is responsive to issues filed by the community. Would love more promotion of this. And it's something I always bring up also in investor meetings, like, hey, it's not just people contributing code, it's also people contributing ideas. How do we get more quantitative about this? Because it's always like, oh, how many people contributed code? Well, 2,000 plus people contributed code. How many are contributing in issues? And I now say over 10,000 because that's my gut feel, but I kind of feel bad every time because I don't have an exact number. I think 10,000 is probably a lower bound. I've seen a lot of people commenting, but we don't have any data. And you could look over it, like the unique number of people commenting and how responsive we are. I think it's much more useful to look at the unique number of people commenting, because if they have a bad experience, they'll just go away. And it's not like a goal of the community advocacy team to respond. It should be our product managers. So although it's a lagging indicator, I think it'd be a good first indicator. So yeah, that was a suggestion.
Thanks, Sid. I did meet with the NerdC, and I met with the data team yesterday, and I thought I saw in SciSense a dashboard on community contributed or customer contributed issues. So that's the only thing I know that we're currently that I think we're currently measuring.
Yeah, so I actually, just to add to what you're saying, Christina, I had originally put that comment up, and it was based off of Ray's presentation at Scale, where he was talking about how when people are contributing code, he'll actually monitor things and try to follow up on issues and make sure that community members are being responded to. So actually, Ray, do you know if your program tracks any of that?
No, that metrics is focused entirely on MRs, but I think Sid's questions on issues, and we have a pretty good dashboard on Bitergia, and issue is one area that we haven't really looked at, and we can take a look at that and look at issues that at least has the label like community contribution, and try to see if we can gather some good data point. But that's something I can definitely look at in the dashboard. But Sid, I guess the other question is, are you looking at just the GitLab issues, or other areas like Reddit or forum or other forums where people ask questions and raise issues?
Yeah, so I would keep it limited to our issue trackers, but for all our projects. So if they comment even on our static website or on the runner, that should count. I would not look at issues filed. So this is not the same thing as code contributed, where we look at who sent this merge request, do we get it over the finish line? And it doesn't matter what happens in the meantime. If you look at issues filed, actually we have too many issues being filed. We got a ton of duplicates, it's a ton of work. That's not what we want to encourage. We want to encourage collaboration, and collaboration happens through comments in the same issues. We got issues from like 4 years ago that we filed, but it's still great if customers tell us like, oh, you're thinking about it this way, you're working on it right now, but I see it going off. Let's go left or right. So don't look at issues, look at comments, and I would look at the unique number of people commenting across our issue trackers. But we can start with the GitLab issue tracker because you got to start somewhere.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I mean, just to extend what Ray was saying, I mean, there might be a way that we might be able to provide some data as a pilot, perhaps, as in, yeah, we're looking already at, or we're getting that data from issues on the Vitergi dashboard, which is where we keep our community metrics. And we do have a way of it's not perfect, but we do have a way of detecting whether someone is a member of the GitLab team or whether it's that person is a community member, whether community member.
Any other comments on that question? Okay, I think we will move on to the next. Kristen, you have the next question. Would you like to verbalize?
Sure. Yeah, last week I was on a panel that was mostly around how to get your first engineering job, and there were a lot of really good questions. And I wanted to be able to clearly state, you know, like contributing to GitLab could help you also with your application there. I didn't say that because I wasn't sure when I had looked at the documents ahead of time. I filed an issue, which I linked there, with people ops around potentially having some kind of mechanism that would gather up someone's contributions to the code base. And there's a secondary issue that's already on the board with Luca around creating badges for community contributions. But I just wanted to raise that here and just see if that's something that the team has been thinking about, or if there's something maybe I missed around how we would go about finding those candidates, especially if they haven't had a job before, or maybe they're new to this profession, or like women in technology, things like that, where potentially contributing could help them move to the front of the line, or at least closer up.
Sure. Thanks for the great question, Ray. Would you like to? I know Ray has to take off here in a few minutes, but we'll see if you can. We'll let you get started, and then if you need to go, we'll finish.
Yeah, thanks for the question too, Christian. And I think a similar question came up during the last call. I don't think we have a good data in terms of like how many of our like engineering hires, for example, have contributed to GitLab before. I mean, I think it's a pretty decent number, but maybe I can work with the people ops team to find out if there's a way to get an estimate in terms of number. And the other thing that I'm a little worried about, because I've kind of dealt with this with some of the contributors, I don't want that data to, you know, have people get the wrong impression that just because you get contributed, like you're, I mean, you have a significant advantage in terms of hiring, because I mean, I talked to a number of engineering managers. I mean, it's obviously an advantage if you contributed to before. But I mean, there are like a lot of other areas that we look at when we hire people, right? I mean, how you ability to work in teams, work remotely, communication skills, etc. So little like trying to be cautious when I talk to contributors about, you know, possibility of, you know, getting hired at GitLab, because I do stress that there are other areas that we look at, and, you know, point to a handbook in terms of what we look at in terms of our candidates. So I don't know if Christian, if that's helpful, but yeah, I'm also curious as to, you know, maybe a percentage of people who had contributed before getting hired as an engineer, but.
Yeah, that helps, but I think maybe it's more for the person just starting off, or if there's guidance that maybe we don't hire juniors, or if there's something like that that's very clear, like a line in the sand, or maybe we should say that. Otherwise, we could find a vehicle for someone who's like earlier on in their career to kind of take their first steps with GitLab.
Right. I mean, we definitely do want to encourage people. I mean, whether they, you know, get a job at GitLab or not, we do want people to participate in open source and get experience. And, you know, I want to tell people that this is a, you know, nice, safe and welcoming place for people to do that. I mean, I do like that idea versus saying, you know, this is, you know, one shortcut to getting a job here. That would be kind of misleading, but.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that too. Hi, I'm Nuritzi and I'm the open source program manager. I have been thinking about contribution profiles, or just how a contributor builds up their sort of social credibility by contributing to projects that are hosted on GitLab.com, that are hosted on, you know, their own GitLab instances. And on slide number 5, it was one of the points that I heard from community members that, you know, you always hear is, you know, people obviously have passion projects, but a lot of times they use their contributions as a way to gain employment and to show that they're able to, you know, be great at collaborating with people all across the world, and all these skills that it takes to contribute to something like an open source project. So I'd love to look into how we can help people with that aspect of, I think it's important for contributors to self-promote and to showcase what they've done. So that ties into what you're looking for. So I'm, you know, just getting started, but I'd love to see how we can make it easier for people to really showcase the work that they've done on projects. Yep.
Kristen, this is a bit of a separate kind of point, but does address your earlier question around, you know, do we hire junior engineers? And there's actually a comment in the engineering handbook that explains that we're not hiring junior level folks at this time. So we do have an internship program. I'm not sure if they're still, you know, filling those roles or if those roles have been filled, but as far as juniors go, it's pretty clear right now in the engineering handbook that that's not happening. I'm not sure if that information is totally up to date, but it's in there.
Okay.
Thanks, John. I was actually going to jump in with that. So, hey, Christian, I'm one of the support engineering managers. So this is a question that we get quite a lot, especially in APAC, where we tend to find that the capabilities of the candidates that we go after tends not to be as closely aligned as candidates that we find in the Americas and EMEA. We do not hire juniors, and there is some good rationale which Eric has put together, which is in the handbook. That said, we also know that everyone needs to start somewhere. Like we do with everything else in GitLab, the requirements for the job, regardless of where in the engineering organization you want to be, whether it's support, whether it's in one of the specific groups, whatever it is, the requirements are put up there. Whenever we have someone approach us that is starting out in their career, the first thing that we would do is direct them to those requirements and those capabilities, and go be very, very self-critical in terms of how you feel your capabilities in those different areas are. And if you feel that it's close enough, sure, there will be a initial assessment that you're going to have to go through. There will be screening calls. There will be a technical interview, and we can make the decision from there. Something that I want to add, which I think is particularly helpful for community, is that if anyone does submit any projects that they have been working on, we do look at that as part of the application, and we do take that into consideration. It's not a shortcut. It's not necessarily going to put you at the front of the line, but it's definitely going to be a big plus because it shows that you're passionate about it. And the other part is that we do give feedback. We actually have one of the support engineers on the call today who the first time they applied for a position at GitLab technically wasn't quite there. We gave feedback about the areas that could do with a little bit more work. And I think it was about 6 or 9 months later, they came back and got a job, and they're now doing really, really well. And that's because we are not going to lower the hiring bar, but we will help people figure out what they need to do to meet the hiring bar. I hope that helps. And if you want to talk more about this, I'm happy to, just ping me. I'm happy to talk about it anytime.
That definitely helps. And I think just as a PM, that helps me sort of get my head around the process as well. And what I can say when I'm talking to people at events like this. And so maybe there needs to just be more formal clarification also through the PM work, just of that bar and like how to also encourage contribution. Thank you.
Thanks for the great question and discussion. That is it in the agenda. We do have a few more minutes. Is there anyone else who would like to add another question to the agenda or verbalize it? All right, with that, I think we will conclude today's group conversations for community relations. Thanks everyone for your input. Have a good day.